Welcome back. It is easy to become numb to all the stories we do about the heroin epidemic, so let's shock you. The New York Times reports more people die from drug overdoses than gun crime and car crashes. In 2015, over 52,000 people died from overdoses, more than the capacity of Yankee Stadium. Now get this, opioids are responsible for deaths of 32% of people ages 15 to 44 in Sarasota County, 41% of those 15 to 44 in Manatee, and since January in Sarasota County there have been more than 70 overdoses, 14 fatalities. And joining us for more is PJ Brooks, Vice President of Outpatient and Youth Services at First Step Recovery, Caitlin Perez, Community Affairs Director at the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office, and Kelly Miller, the Director of Purpose House, a halfway house in Sarasota County. And Caitlin, let me start with you, because those numbers recently in Sarasota County alone are unbelievable. And the first question I had in mind is that, you know, Tom Knight, the sheriff, talked about all the grant money that the office gets in terms of you know, the drugs that can rescue people from the middle of an overdose. How do you keep up with the supply or the grants out there so deputies always have Narcan and the other drugs?
Sure. Well, you know, Alan, what's startling are the numbers that you just presented. And this is something, unfortunately, our deputies are seeing every single day. I think it's fair to say just about every shift we're responding to an opiate overdose. What Sheriff Knight is really great about is seeing things a couple years ahead of time. He's a very progressive sheriff. He saw this coming. In October 2015, he equipped all of his deputies with naloxone. It's an auto-injector. I have one here today. And essentially what it is it's the first line of defense for our first responders. When they get on scene, they inject a patient experiencing an overdose with this, and it can reverse those symptoms immediately. A lot of times we're there before the paramedics, so we're getting there at the same time, and we can deploy this and it can help save someone's life.
You know, there was a story recently that some of the drugs that people are taking, the fentanyl and the carfentanil, are so powerful that one dosage of that is not sometimes sufficient enough to bring them back.
Sure, and there have been times when several of these have needed to be deployed, or like I said, as first responders, when deputies first get there, they deploy this, followed by paramedics that then arrive and are administering Narcan as well.
Show us how that works for a moment.
Now, this is just a trainer, so this is an example of how it would work, but the real version speaks to you just the way that this does.
This trainer contains no needle or drug. If you are ready to use, pull off red safety guard. To inject, place black end against outer thigh, then press firmly and hold in place for 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Injection complete.
And this is happening every day in our neighborhoods around Sarasota. And I guess the other question that comes to mind, and we've been reporting on this epidemic consistently, you know, for the last 2 years, but why have there been so many overdoses in just this short period of time since the beginning of January? Can anybody take a stab that, you know, people watching this right now can understand this?
Well, if you don't mind, what we're looking at is we've got a situation where typically it's heroin that people are talking about. We switched from the prescription opiates to heroin because we did an excellent job of curtailing access to prescription opiates in our community. And then so they switched like the game whack-a-mole to what was available, and that was heroin. And now, because heroin is being cut with fentanyl, they're ingesting a drug that comes in very minute amounts, or enough to be a lethal dose. So it's about the power or the potency of the drugs that they're taking. And in fact, many times they don't know that they're doing it because it's being disguised to look like heroin. It's now even being pressed in to look like Oxycontin pills. The sheriff showed, you know, at his most recent press conference that they're identifying those kinds of things. So it's a ruse in many respects.
The law of unintended consequences. We thought we did a good thing in terms of getting rid of the pill mills in Florida, and they just moved people back to heroin and these other products like fentanyl and carfentanil. Kelly, this is not just a theoretical discussion to you. You live this. And we asked you to come on board because you are a recovering addict, but you've been clean for 5 years?
5 years in August.
So 5 years past what you went through, do you have a different perspective than when you were first, emerging from your addiction?
I definitely have a different perspective on life. When I was using, I definitely didn't have too much hope for myself and for others. And so today I definitely have a different perspective on life and the lives of others, and what they can accomplish.
And I would imagine that helps you in terms of what you're doing now, which is at a halfway house. You're helping people who are primarily emerging from jail time.
From jail, from treatment, sometimes right from detox they come in.
Okay. We are just getting started with this very important discussion. We'll pick it up after we check a weather, so stay with us. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing heroin and opioid addiction on the Suncoast. Our guests tonight are PJ Brooks of First Step Recovery, Caitlin Perez of the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office, and Kelly Miller of Purpose House. And Caitlin, we were discussing in the break, even the numbers that we've been reporting during the show, it changes every single day. So what are the current numbers here, at least in the last couple of weeks?
Sure. As of Friday, the numbers that we have, our overdoses in Sarasota County are up to 99. So we're looking just at about 3.5 months worth of responses at 99 and a total of 15 fatalities.
I'm wondering if we're heading towards a record.
It's really hard to say. I think for Sarasota County, for the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office, even one overdose is more than what we need here. But I still think we're not seeing the numbers, and PJ can speak to this too, we're still not seeing the numbers that other places around the state and around the country are. But again, that's our message here, is even one overdose is too many.
The fact of life here is that a lot of people will have watched Jacqueline's story there and see the people on the street, and you know what their responses are, PJ? Just get these people out of town. You respond to that.
Well, you know what? It saddens me, and the reason why it saddens me, I've lived here my entire life, and this is my community, and those are members of my community. And in truth, many of them, they may look like, oh, there's the folks that are homeless on the streets, and the truth is 6 months ago they were a doctor's daughter or son, and a teacher's. In fact, if you look at those that are overdosing, many of them are coming from middle and upper middle class families. This is an equal opportunity offender, and don't take it for what it is at face value. You need to look at it deeply and really understand that these are individuals that have had lives, have had hope, had dreams, and no one signed up for this. No one said, I want to sign up and be this person that's out there that's having to be revived and out of control with my disease.
I guess my question now is, what are we not doing that we should be? Because you have your facilities like yours and halfway houses, you have law enforcement being put into positions that normally they wouldn't be. I mean, you normally do not have police officers and deputies as basically first responders. You hear Congressman Buchanan is looking for federal money to look at the mail so we could get the fentanyl and carfentanil that are coming in from overseas. But what have we not figured out, Kelly?
I don't really have an answer. My answer would be is that once, we stop that, from coming in as, we're on the treatment side of it. And so, right now, all I know that we can do is to treat. And that is through 12-step programs and 12-step meetings and all of that to get them from that point of hopelessness to feeling like that they're worthy, and that's kind of what, kind of where I'm.
Because Caitlin, you would often hear law enforcement is not necessarily the answer to this problem. Mm-hmm. So from the sheriff's office, what would you like to see that, whether it's the government or the community, not doing right now?
Sure, and I think you alluded to it well earlier. It's a societal problem. This isn't a law enforcement problem. It's fallen into our laps. We are first responders, and at the end of the day, we're here to protect lives. So we go and we deploy these naloxones because that's our job. But as far as society goes, this is something that people across the board, as PJ mentioned, are battling. There is no targeted group here. We're dealing with this every day. From a law enforcement perspective, we kind of have developed this four-prong approach through, Sheriff Knight, of enforcement, prevention, education, and treatment. And that's what we're doing. Enforcement, we're finding these drug houses. We're taking these people off of the streets, these dealers. We're trying to identify sources. Through prevention, that goes hand in hand with enforcement. We're trying to prevent the next victim. We actually have charged someone in relation to an opiate overdose with manslaughter. So if we find criminal intent or any sort of criminality in a case like this, we pursue it. As far as education, we constantly work with our partners, First Step, Drug Free Sarasota, et cetera, to educate community members. We run public service announcements. And then through treatment, something really unique in Sarasota County, and Kelly's familiar with this, we have addiction recovery pods in our jail designated for 48 men and 48 women to find sobriety, to find hope, thanks to volunteers like Kelly who come into our facility and show them.
I'm wondering if the other factor is, I mean, it's great that you could promote sobriety and hope, but the fact is we're dealing with an economy out here that many people are still struggling with. Heroin has been out there for decades, and it has been a problem, and we could, going back how many years, but is the number of overdoses somehow connected to the fact that we had a terrible economic recession back in 2008. We've recovered, but not all the way, so people are feeling these economic pressures in ways that they may not have for many decades?
For me, it was, my upbringing, and so I went through a lot of traumatic things in my childhood, and so that kind of led me on a path to search for, my self-esteem and my self-worth and all of these things, and I searched for that through drugs and alcohol and other things, and so that's how it was. That's how my life was. And it wasn't until I was willing to admit that I had a problem and that I was powerless over it and I needed a change was when I finally reached out for help.
And PJ, I would imagine you see a lot of different kinds of causes for people to fall into the cycle.
There's no one cause that you can say that this is the issue, and I think what we have to look at is for each individual that's dealing with addiction, you've got an individual dealing with addiction. They have their own unique story and unique issue that they're dealing with. But when we look at what I think would be important to accomplish is moving the vision from let's morally measure people, let's say they're good or bad people because they have this disease, and look at it from a public health perspective. And much of what the sheriff is doing, it does just that. And looking at it, this meets the criteria for an epidemic. If you had 10 people with Zika in Sarasota County, I bet you we would hear a state of an emergency called by the governor. And we're dealing with this across the country, across our state, and yes, locally. And if we were to put the resources that they do behind those kinds of issues, it would be a markedly different story.
All right, let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll have final thoughts from our guests, plus what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, licensing for medical marijuana growers in Florida. Welcome back. 2017 is outpacing last year in the number of overdoses on the Sun Coast, including the number of fatal overdoses. What can be done to bring those numbers down and help addicts recover? Our guests join us right now for final thoughts. So your perspective, Caitlin, because your officers out there and deputies are extremely busy and there's no sign that it is letting up in any way.
Right, and we don't think this is a problem that we're going to arrest our way out of. At the end of the day, this is something that we need the community's help to battle. We need people to know the signs, the symptoms of an overdose. We need them to call us. Worry less about where the drugs are, where they got them from. In that moment when someone's experiencing an overdose, they have got to call 911. It's a matter of life and death. Loved ones need to seek treatment and, be vigilant. There's something to be said about if you think there's something going on in your neighborhood, let us know. We don't know what we don't know. We're there to help. We always will be, but we need the community's help. Kelly, from your perspective, what can be done in terms of helping those who are coming out of recovery and out of the correction system in terms of not going back into that deadly cycle?
Well, my thought would be that leaving, a place like First Step or the jail after being in the recovery pod and getting a taste of it is to come into a transitional home and to take 6 months. And that's what I did. I took that time to be able to work through the 12-step program and to clear up any of that stuff that I had been dealing with for my whole life, and building a support group in the community, and then possibly from there, when they're ready, is to be able to move on.
And PJ, the question I always ask is in terms of resources. Do you have enough resources? Are there enough beds out there to handle the population that is struggling with addiction?
No, just candidly no. We do not have enough resources. There's not enough connectivity in that, and I know people say, well, you keep talking about funding. Well, how else are services and supports going to be covered? Individuals, many of them, by the time they're coming to our door, yes, they may have come from a middle-class family, but they're indigent at this point. They don't have the ability to cover their costs for treatment, and we do the best we can with the resources and supports we get. But it really is about, let's really put something behind this.
All right, and unfortunately, we'll have to let it go there, but thank you all for joining us. Before we go, we want to share with you what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, access to medical marijuana in Florida. In November, more than 2/3 of voters gave support for an amendment to legalize medical marijuana. Right now, only 7 companies are licensed to grow and sell it in the state. While some say this will make regulation easier, others argue it will drive up the costs. And here is what some of you are saying. Nate Metz writes, how are 7 licensed growers going to be able to keep up with the demand of patients without making it overpriced and forcing patients back to the black market for their medicine? And Jeanette McDaniel writes, with all the proof we have that it helps and all the revenue we would get, I don't understand all this stalling. And Chris P. writes, do your job. The voter said yes by 71%. My daughter has 2 to 20 seizures a day and is drug resistant. It's proven to help other patients, and we need it now. Hashtag do your job, Florida. We'll join the conversation about the opioid epidemic by visiting our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And FYI, you can watch past Roundtable discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thanks to our guests for being here tonight. PJ Brooks is Vice President of Outpatient and Youth Services at First Step of Sarasota. Caitlin Perez is Community Affairs Director at the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office. And Kelly Miller is the Director of Purpose House in Sarasota.